Don't lay there in your comfortable little coma and think, I'm going to risk all that because I feel responsible for you. I'm not responsible!
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear the thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. An investigation conducted by officials of the Gilgit-Baltistan region of the Karakoram Himalaya, which is jurisdiction over the area in which K2, the world's second tallest mountain, falls, they will determine responsibility and possibly apportion blame in this case. Perhaps we will see a fine or a sanction of some sort, perhaps more. Perhaps new regulations will be initiated. The question hanging over this incident is, I think, ultimately an ethical one and a moral one, not necessarily a legal one. When one has the capacity or merely the opportunity to help someone else and one does not, is one guilty of a crime? What duty does one have to one's fellow man? Nevertheless, I do think it's important to explore the law, that's L-A-W, not L-O-R-E, on high mountains. Does it no longer apply? So, who then is responsible? Are there or should there be ethics in the high mountains? Before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Bear in mind I'm going to be also dealing with the different versions of this story and also the different timelines that have been given. Much the same situation we do in true crime. Also, if you're interested in the JonBenet Ramsey case, I'm going to be doing a very interesting analysis of intertextualities between JonBenet Ramsey, that case, and the Madeleine McCann case, specifically with regard to suspects that are being fielded as prime suspects, and where that is taking true crime right now. So look out for that. If you're enjoying this episode, please like, share, leave a comment. You can also hit the thanks button, and let's get started. So in terms of this question about responsibility, let's consider a few scenarios. We're basically going to look at three different perspectives. The first one is that climbers are responsible. Climbers must take personal responsibility for themselves. Like soldiers heading for the front line in a war, high-altitude climbers on the world's tallest mountains know that they are putting themselves in harm's way. K2 is sometimes called the Savage Mountain, and in 2023 it was particularly capricious, only providing a single brief weather window on July 27th. On one of the world's most dangerous mountains, clearly one has to be unusually vigilant, even more so than on Mount Everest, in terms of one's personal preparations, one's personal gear, one's personal readiness. So what do we know about Muhammad Hassan? Well, according to Explorers Web, quote, Hassan was an employee of Lila Peak Expedition, and this is the branding, the logo of that expedition company. Alex Abramov's Seven Summit Club assigned him to assist the rope fixers during the summit push. So you basically have him being shared between two expedition companies, and you can see how that's already complicating this whole question of responsibility. According to Explorers Web, quote, before the summit push, all companies provide workers to join the rope fixing team. That is what Abramov told Explorers Web. And he said, well, we contributed 3 Pakistani high-altitude porters, and Hassan was one of them. He also said that we don't know what really happened because he was ahead of our members and Sherpa group. Members only saw that something happened at the ropes in the traverse, end quote. And so that's already an issue. Why does the company that was in charge of him not know what happened? Shouldn't they have had the responsibility to know where their climbers were? According to ABC News, quote, Steindl's fellow climber Flamech alleged in an interview with the Austrian newspaper Der Standard that Hassan had no high altitude experience. And so Fleimich said that he wasn't equipped properly, he did not have experience, he was a base camp porter, and for the first time was picked to be a high altitude porter. So whose responsibility is it to have one's staff equipped properly? What would you say to that? Then according to Explorers Web, quote, some climbers, including Lakpa Sherpa of 8K Expeditions and cameraman Philip Flamich, noted that Hassan was not very experienced and that his equipment was inadequate for a summit push on K2. Explorers Web contacted Lila Park Expeditions for a statement, but we are yet to hear back, end quote. From this we can basically see that Hassan getting into trouble and ultimately foundering at a critical point in the climb wasn't so much an accident as an accident waiting to happen. In hindsight, it appears inevitable rather than an unexpected accident. Haven't we been here before? Number 2, accidents and mistakes do happen. When they do, who is next in line in terms of responsibility? It's difficult to blame the victim in these circumstances if, as an employee, he was ordered up the mountain. You could say he was just following orders. It's also hard to place the burden of responsibility on Kristen Harila in the sense that she was affiliated with Seven Summit Treks, which is different, and when we've got to be explicit about this, Seven Summit Treks is different from the Seven Summits Club that outsourced Hassan from the Lila Peak squad. It's entirely possible that Hassan, in a sense, he was like a duck out of water. He wasn't in an environment that he was used to. And so when he was taken out of his company, his expedition company, and put into a situation he was unfamiliar with people he was unfamiliar with, perhaps he also ended up misunderstanding which expedition he was supposed to be helping. Otherwise, it's hard to explain why he was near the front of the group with Harila and with Seven Summits Treks. If you know mountain lore, that's lore, Lore, the rope fixers tend to be Sherpas and porters who go up ahead of everyone else and they quote-unquote fix the slopes, making them safe. That could explain why Hassan was where he was, but it makes no sense that a base camp porter suddenly finds himself at the sharp end of the line doing the most dangerous work that's typically done by the head honchos, the most experienced Sherpas. It's also possible Hassan opportunistically seized his chance. This has happened before with Sherpas, because porters and Sherpas who can put a summit on their CVs are immediately more valuable and in demand and can charge higher prices. The employment prospects improve when that occurs. Although information is still trickling in and a probe has just gotten underway, I think it's fair to suggest that a substantial amount of responsibility lies or ought to lie with the expedition company that hired Hassan in the first place. Their Facebook page is amateurish, their website quite crude, and there's absolutely no message of condolences, none that I could find, on any of their platforms. One could also argue that the moment Hassan was outsourced to the Seven Summits Club, Seven Summits became responsible for their new member. I haven't seen any acknowledgement of what happened to Hassan on their platforms either. As we saw with the Titan submersible, it feels disingenuous to flaunt one's successes online through one's marketing and promotions, while at the same time concealing flaws and failures, or certainly pretending that there aren't any. So one regulation I'd like to see in order to encourage greater transparency in terms of these guiding companies and the legitimacy of these companies, and I think this will also lead to better self-discipline, is if expedition companies are mandated to post news of their own members or crew that are killed or seriously injured on the mountain. And this is something that they should be required to do each season within a minimum prescribed period, for example, 48 hours or 96 hours. And that brings us to the third point, and this is really just my opinion. And it's also just the fact that in that arena, it is a very subjective arena. There are different people up there for different reasons. different roles. And I think now that we understand the dynamics and arrangements a little better, it's easy to imagine two simple scenarios where things could have gone wrong. Firstly, it's possible that there was a language barrier that led to Hassan mistaking Harila's outfit with the one that he was supposed to be with. It's also possible his own expedition mates didn't know him very well, the one in the new company, and perhaps assumed that he knew what he was doing, or simply didn't know where he was or what he was doing. In the end, in a life-threatening situation, which is a little like soldiers from different commands and sections and companies, all advancing on the same goal, if you imagine climbing a very high mountain, it tends to be approached in the same way that wars are fought. There are supply lines, there are base camps, there are advanced camps, there's infrastructure on the front line. There are different personnel that are allocated to different aspects of this whole assault on the mountain. And so it's difficult to dictate what a soldier must do or owes another soldier when he's no longer in his own squad, as Hassan was. Does that make sense? So I think a basic rule must be that one stays in touch with one's group, that you are responsible for them and they are for you, and that is a way to improve the safety of the group. By improving the safety of the group, you improve the safety of the individual. Any situation that falls outside of that, volunteer efforts are exactly that, voluntary. But one shouldn't expect generous charity on high mountains when time is of the essence and lives are on the line. A really good narrative that explores this idea of what duty does one have to our fellow man, even if he's a stranger, is The Fisher King. I played that at the beginning of this episode. Well, here's another snippet.
I don't feel responsible for you or for anybody. Everybody's got bad things that happen to them. I'm not God. I don't decide. People survive.
In any event, what we decide to care about also determines the level of meaning in our lives. If you care more about certain things, the level of meaning increases. If you don't care about a lot of things, well, you don't have a lot of meaning in your life. And that is why I think a conversation about tagging a mountain summit potentially at the expense of someone's life, even a stranger's, is worth having. And I think you can extend that conversation to wherever you are in the world at ground level. How much responsibility do you have to complete strangers, people who are poor and vulnerable, people that you don't owe anything to, but they are people in your orbit, people in your neighborhood? Do you owe them anything? Should you owe them anything? If you want my opinion, the primary responsibility, all things being equal, for Hassan was first and foremost Hassan. And I'm talking about in the scenario of you're very high up on a mountain in the death zone. Obviously, if he was lying on a sidewalk, then the situation would be completely different. Although climbers should come to the aid of one another in the death zone, I don't think that is an entitlement. One cannot expect to be rescued in the death zone if one gets into trouble. I also think, as a general rule, if a climber beside you, no matter who it is, needs help, one should try to do everything one can do to render aid, regardless of age, sex, the team, nationality, whatever. At a bare minimum, communicate with the climber and then let others know, signal clearly what is going on. Near the summit on the world's highest mountain, everyone is in harm's way, and by trying to save somebody else, one literally risks oneself as well. And so to create a situation where one needs to be rescued, it often leads to others risking their lives, and often, rescue expeditions can end up having casualties as well. Whoever made the call to have Hassan transferred to do fixed roping near the summit when he was completely inexperienced in terms of that role, I think that person is primarily responsible for this debacle. One also imagines these expedition companies need to kit out their own climbing crews if their climbers can't do so themselves. That should be regulated as well. The fact that Hassan wasn't wearing a down suit at 8,000 meters on the world's second highest mountain is ridiculous. Didn't anyone else know that? I mean, the people around him, didn't his peers see that or realize that? I mean, did they only realize that once they reached the Great Serac, once they were in the bottleneck? That's very late to be paying any attention to the climber next to you. Also, didn't he know that it was ill-advised to proceed to the summit given the gear that he had? Didn't he say anything, I'm cold, something like that, to anybody? So I think there's also responsibility in terms of personal responsibility. On mountains, as I've said before, there are roles and there are specialized assignments. As such, I don't think one can simply point to someone and say, you should have saved him. It depends on their role. I would say clients have less of a responsibility to Sherpas or to porters than Sherpas, porters, and the expedition crews, especially its leaders, have to each other. I'm certainly not saying that climbers have zero responsibility. I think all should have, if someone's near you, then you should, pay attention and try to be of some kind of assistance. Unlike the clients, a porter is actually there to serve and assist other climbers. That's his job. If he can't do it, one imagines the responsibility to look after him or to fall to his team members, other porters, other Sherpas, and then also clients on his team and the expedition leader. I've got to say this particular image of his mother crying is definitely it certainly pulls at the heartstrings. I would want to look into that aspect. Who were his teammates? Where were they? What did they say? What did they do? And who was the expedition leader? Why haven't we heard from him? We also need to find out more about Hassan. Did he communicate any distress at lower altitude? Did he have a radio? Did he use the radio? Did he show any signs of fatigue? If he did, was he listened to or was he pushed on? Were his fears overridden? Finally, I think it's good that this scenario is being talked about. I think we should care about the plights of Sherpas and porters on the mountain. I think if you can take care of the Sherpas and the porters, then so much more can you take care and make sure that the clients are in good hands as well. Because without them, most summits wouldn't be possible. To the credit of the guys criticizing what happened, the Austrian and the German, they went to see the family of the climber who died. And Steindl said that Hassan had taken the job of rope fixer to pay for his diabetic mother's medical bills despite a lack of experience. They actually went to see the Sherpa's family. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.